Hey guys, tonight we travel to the slippery edge of Mount Silene, where clouds curl around craggy stone and olive trees whisper secrets only goats and minor deities are meant to hear. You're crouched beside a cave, feet bare, against the damp rock when you hear it, the softest gurgle of laughter, half muffled, half mischievous. And there he is, not a mighty god in shining armor, not a wrathful thunderer, just a baby. A squishy, giggling, absolutely up-to-no-good baby. Meet Hermes, freshly born and already plotting his first crime. You probably won't survive this, to be honest. I mean, the ancient world is full of terrifying things. Medusa heads, vengeful goddesses, oceans that think too highly of themselves. But a newborn god with a high IQ and zero moral compass, that's next-level dangerous. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing this sleepy little myth circle stretch around the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's dawn or close enough. The stars are fading like spilled milk across the sky, and baby Hermes is crawling out of the cave where his mother Maya just gave birth to him. And by crawling, we mean hatching an escape route with tactical precision. He's barely a day old but already fully formed, and he has places to be. You watch as he pads away, not toddling like an actual baby, but walking like he's late for a meeting that will shape the cosmos. Naked, of course, because clothes are for people with less self-esteem. According to mainstream mythology, Hermes was born to Maya, one of the Pleiades, in a hidden cave far from Olympus. And unlike most newborns, he didn't wait to be named, swaddled, or sung to. He took one look at the universe and decided it was time to mess with it. The first thing he does, finds a turtle. You trail him through the scrubby underbrush where a poor turtle is just trying to do turtle things, namely, nothing. And Hermes scoops it up with the glee of someone who's just realized they can make objects do whatever they want. Tortoise shell, check. Goat. Gut strings. Also somehow check. Add a little divine instinct and musical curiosity and boom, the lyre is born. One of the earliest string instruments in Greek mythology, invented by a baby who hasn't even eaten breakfast yet. This invention wasn't just a fun side quest. In mythological terms, it was a seismic cultural development. Music, after all, was central to Greek life rituals, ceremonies, banquets, poetry. The lyre became Hermes' first contribution to the world of the gods, and he wasn't even out of infancy. Historians still argue whether this myth emerged as a backstory for the lyre's popularity or as an allegory for creative genius striking in the least expected places. Some even suggest it's an encoded metaphor for cultural shifts between older rustic cults and the more urbane Olympian pantheon. But for you right now, it's just weirdly adorable. Back in the cave, Maya is asleep, which is understandable, having just given birth to a trickster god. But also she probably should have baby-proofed. Hermes' lyre tucked under his arm like a toddler-sized rock star, grins up at the sky, and sets off toward his next scheme. You follow, sighing gently because you already know this kid is going to ruin someone's perfectly normal day. And he's going to love every minute of it. You barely have time to blink before Hermes is halfway across Arcadia, barefoot and unbothered, whistling a tune that no one's heard yet, but one that will centuries later be taught in music theory courses and softly hummed in candlelit villas. He's got that baby on a mission energy. But instead of toys or snacks, what he wants is cows. Specifically, Apollo's cows. Now, Apollo, god of the sun, prophecy, music, and basically the ancient Greek equivalent of that kid who always reminded the teacher to assign homework, is not exactly the person you want to annoy, especially not on your first day of life. But Hermes naturally sees this as the perfect target. You watch as he approaches the pastures near Pieria, where Apollo's sacred herd grazes under the supervision of sunlight itself. These aren't normal cows, by the way. They are godly cows, shiny, majestic, probably smell like thyme and warm sunshine. Hermes eyes them with the confidence of a child who has never once faced consequences. He claps his tiny hands together mostly for himself and gets to work. First, he waits until nightfall because he's not completely reckless. Just mostly. The moonlight paints silver stripes along the grass and Hermes slinks in like a toddler-shaped shadow. Now, stealing cows might sound boring, but this is Hermes we're talking about. He doesn't just take the cows, he choreographs their departure. Think Ocean's 11, but everyone is hoofed. He reverses their hooves. You heard that right. He literally turns their hooves backwards so the tracks point in the opposite direction. Historians still argue whether this detail was meant to reflect early symbolic ideas about Hermes as a god of boundaries and inversions, or whether it was just ancient Greek comedy gold. Then he crafts a pair of sandals for himself out of branches and woven bark designed to disguise his own footprints. Which, let's be honest, is impressive for someone who was born yesterday. You follow the strange parade as Hermes leads the cows away not with a whip or rope, but with sheer enthusiasm, and maybe a little divine magnetism. He guides them over streams, through groves, down forgotten goat trails, and all the while he hums that melody again, the one born with the lyre. By morning, the herd is hidden far from the pastures, tucked into a cave that would confuse even the most dedicated cartographer. Hermes, clearly pleased with himself, stacks a few twigs at the cave's mouth as if to say, "Mission complete." You sit beside him on a mossy rock. He pats your shoulder with a chubby hand, then takes a nap right there on your lap. Because grand theft divine livestock is exhausting, obviously. Meanwhile, far to the north, Apollo is beginning to notice that his sacred cows are conspicuously absent, and the sun god is not great at keeping his cool. Back in the cave, Hermes dreams of tortoises and music and sandwiches that don't exist yet. You imagine tiny Z's floating above his head, each shaped like a lyre string. It's a peaceful moment, one that frankly won't last. Because if you know anything about Greek gods, it's that retribution arrives faster than room temperature tzatziki. Hermes wakes up just before noon, which for a baby god with a full crime spree under his belt is perfectly respectable. You stretch beside him, brushing moss from your robes. You're already more tired than you should be. Traveling with Hermes is like babysitting a caffeinated fox. He yawns, scratches his belly, and then with no warning whatsoever decides it's time to further complicate his own alibi. Because as it turns out, the baby thief didn't just steal the cows. He now wants to make absolutely sure no one can trace it back to him. So he gets creative. You follow him up a hillside where he begins gathering things. Random things. A bundle of reeds, bark from a poplar, sap, and then, you're not making this up, a pair of sandals from a local peddler who is not ready to argue with an unnervingly articulate toddler. Hermes wears these sandals in reverse, walking backward across the landscape. The result: a confounding trail of footprints that leads toward, then away from where he actually went. To a casual observer, it looks like he was robbed. You stare at the backward prints in the dust, then at Hermes, who winks, yes winks, and says in perfect god-baby sass, let them chase their own shadows. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth is symbolic of Hermes' role as a psychopomp guiding souls between life and death, forward and backward through reality. Or if it's just proof that ancient storytellers loved a good prank. Either way, it works. By the time Apollo starts sniffing around, the trail is a knotted mess. One moment, the cows seem to head north. The next, they're inexplicably going east. Then south. Then looping back like they've joined a conga line. And Hermes. He's back in his cradle. Literally. Yes. He sneakily returns to Mount Cyllene, slips back into his mother's cave, and lies down. Like a perfect cherub cooing softly, eyes wide and innocent. You're there when Maya returns from foraging. She takes one look at her baby and sighs. Not because she suspects anything. No, because he's just too quiet. And quiet babies, as any parent knows, are dangerous. You lean against the cave wall and glance at Hermes, who smirks, then winks again. Later that evening, you step outside to stretch your legs, and that's when you hear it. the faint rustle of solar fury sweeping down the mountainside. Apollo has arrived. He's glowing literally and furious. His golden curls are practically vibrating with rage. His sandals don't touch the ground. He's the god of music, yes, but right now he's playing the tune of Who Took My Divine Livestock, and it's in a very aggressive key. You watch from the shadows as he bursts into the cave demanding answers. Hermes opens one eye and says sweetly, "What cows?" Cue dramatic music. Apollo sputters. Maya blinks. Hermes yawns again. You wisely stay out of it, because nothing diffuses a sun god like a smug infant with an airtight if highly implausible alibi. Apollo storms out, promising to return with backup. And Hermes. He burps, then hums a melody from the lyre he hasn't technically admitted to inventing. And that, dear dreamer, is how you find yourself babysitting a baby god who's just gaslit the literal sun. By morning, the air crackles. You can practically feel Olympus paying attention. Because Apollo, who, let's be honest, takes everything a little personally, is not done. Not even close. He's gone to Zeus, the king of gods, the thunder daddy himself, and now the whole divine family is about to get involved in a cattle dispute. It's not even lunchtime. You tag along, ducking behind clouds and stray bolts of light, as Apollo storms into the gleaming marble court of Olympus, robes flaring dramatically. He looks like someone who hasn't had his coffee, or at least not the sacred nectar and ambrosia equivalent. Zeus listens. That is, he nods while Apollo rants about stolen cows, musical fraud, and a baby who dares mock the order of Olympus. At the phrase baby mockery, Zeus raises one eyebrow. He's heard some things. The muses gossip. He motions for the accused to be brought forward. And here comes Hermes, cradled under Maya's arm like a plump purse. Still in swaddling cloth, still cooing sweetly. When Maya places him at Zeus's feet, Hermes does a stretch so adorable it almost resets your immune system. Then he sits up, folds his pudgy hands, and looks around the divine courtroom like he's weighing his legal options. Zeus booms, "Hermes, did you steal the cows?" Hermes considers this. Then he smiles and launches into what can only be described as the first recorded baby TED Talk. In perfectly charming cadence, he explains how he invented the lyre, how he merely borrowed the cows, how he definitely improved Apollo's day by teaching him the value of not being so uptight, how really this whole event should be seen as a gift to the arts. Historians still argue whether this moment was meant to show Hermes' role as a divine disruptor or as a playful lesson in cosmic humility. But from where you're standing behind a decorative pillar, it's more like the moment a baby successfully outlitigates a sun god. Zeus laughs genuinely. His shoulders shake, his beard bristles with mirth. Apollo. He scowls so hard his lyre strings snap from sheer tension. Hermes, unfazed, pulls out the tortoiseshell lyre and begins to play. The courtroom falls silent. It's a melody you've heard before, soft looping, strangely nostalgic for something you haven't lived yet. Even Hera pauses mid-eye roll. Dionysus leans forward, sloshing wine. Athena cocks her head, and Apollo sighs. Because it's beautiful, infuriatingly so. Fine, he says. Give me the lyre. Keep the cows. Hermes hands it over with both hands solemn and satisfied. Apollo tests it. One note then two. And suddenly he's playing full chords, eyes half closed, toe tapping. The sun god has been successfully bribed. In exchange for forgiveness, Hermes gives up his musical masterpiece. In return, he keeps the cow's gains divine clout and earns the world's fastest promotion. Zeus claps a massive hand on Hermes' shoulder. From now on, he declares you'll be the messenger of the gods. Hermes blinks, then grins. Another job. Sounds like an excuse to wander the universe and stir up mischief professionally. He nods, deal, and just like that, the baby becomes Olympus's postal service prank coordinator and interdimensional delivery boy. All before his first birthday. You step outside into the cloud-bright air of Olympus, dazed by the whirlwind diplomacy. Hermes skips beside you now, carrying a winged cap too large for his head. He looks up at you. Want to see what's in Hades next? You gulp. Because of course he's serious. And because somehow you're still not tired enough to say no. You trail behind Hermes as he skips down the gleaming Olympian steps, winged baby cap askew, grinning like someone who just tricked his boss into giving him a promotion for stealing company property. Because, well, he did. You're not sure what's more unsettling, the fact that Zeus rewarded it, or the fact that you're not even surprised anymore. As you float down through patches of lazy mist, it hits you the cows. Hermes still has them. And yes, he's taken care of them. Sort of. You find them tucked away in a meadow near the base of Mount Silene. They're eating well, mooing contentedly, and strangely enough responding to Hermes' singing. He hums little melodies and they line up like they're waiting for a concert encore. It's the ancient Greek version of a luxury petting zoo. Now, Hermes begins negotiating with himself about what to do with the cows. Keep them, gift them. Use them for further bribes. There's no plan, only vibes. You sit under a fig tree watching as he spins strands of wool into makeshift musical strings just to see if he can play cows like instruments. Spoiler, he cannot. But the cows enjoy the attention. You also realize something unexpected. Hermes is sort of good at this. Not just the scheming part. He's good with people. Animals. Even divine tension. It starts to click. This isn't just a kid with a gift for trouble. It's a god in the making. A god of in-between moments of transitions and transactions of travelers and boundaries of people who don't fit neatly into labels. Historians still argue whether Hermes was originally a foreign deity absorbed into the Greek pantheon, or whether he evolved organically alongside trade routes and migration patterns. But either way, one thing's certain: he embodies movement, even when he's sitting still. Back in the meadow, Hermes lies flat in the grass, gazing up at the clouds, which are beginning to look a little like cows. Or maybe cows that look like clouds. Either way, he squints at one and says, "That one owes me money." You laugh softly. And then, because this is Hermes, you hear a rustle in the bushes. It's a mortal shepherd, which is not great considering Hermes isn't supposed to be fraternizing with humans yet. The man steps into the clearing, eyes widening at the divine cows, the shimmering grass, and the glowing baby, who looks weirdly familiar from some myth his grandmother used to mumble about while mending tunics. Hermes, never missing a beat, tosses a handful of fig leaves in the air and yells, "Congratulations, you've won." The shepherd blinks. Hermes hands him a cow. The shepherd blinks again, then runs, delighted, bewildered, and now the proud owner of one very confused divine bovine. You stare at Hermes. He shrugs. "I had extras." And it's hard to argue with that logic. You lie back in the grass beside him, letting the sun bake your eyelids shut. Somewhere a cow sneezes. Somewhere else, Apollo is playing the lyre and trying not to admit he's having fun. The world feels balanced, at least for now. Because if you've learned anything by now, it's this: Hermes never really stays in one place too long. And you're just lucky you can keep up. It's barely dawn when Hermes sits up abruptly, eyes shining with mischief, already brewing like someone who dreams exclusively in punchlines and chase scenes. He stretches, yawns, and declares, "Let's go see what Hephaestus is up to." You don't even ask why. Because of course the divine toddler wants to visit the god of Fireforge and accidental explosions. What could possibly go wrong? You find Hephaestus in his usual spot, hammering away deep within his molten-walled workshop, a cavern that smells like scorched bronze and singed eyebrows. Sparks leap through the air like fireflies on espresso. Each clang of his hammer echoes like it's narrating its own epic. Hephaestus barely glances up as you and Hermes arrive. But Hermes, being Hermes, doesn't wait for an invitation. He zips around the workshop like a dragonfly on a sugar rush, peering into vats of glowing metal, poking at enchanted anvils and asking questions like, "Can I borrow this lava hammer for reasons?" You wisely step back. And then, because Hermes is constitutionally incapable of just observing, he starts rearranging things. He moves a few tools, juggles some tongs, redirects a cooling stream of molten silver into the shape of a tiny cow because he apparently misses his herd. Hephaestus sighs. What do you want, kid? Hermes grins. I want to see how you make things, and maybe try. Hephaestus eyes him. Please, Hermes adds and produces a perfectly polished pebble from behind his ear. It's shaped like a gear. Somehow, historians still argue whether Hermes was associated with craftsmanship because of myths like this, or whether later stories retrofitted his talents to justify his clever nature. Either way, what happens next is astonishing. Hephaestus hands him a piece of copper. Hermes takes it, rolls it between his fingers like a coin, then tosses it into a vat of cooling bronze, whispering something under his breath. A minute later, he fishes out a whistle. Not just any whistle. This one summons breezes, little twirling eddies of air that dance around your head and make your nose itch. Hermes beams. Trade secret. Hephaestus stares, then very slowly nods. What follows is one of the strangest crafting montages you've ever seen. Hermes improvises a dozen odd trinkets using leftover scraps, feathers, molten glass, and whatever is sticky and vaguely shiny. None of it is practical. All of it is somehow enchanting. You see a mirror that always shows you 3 seconds into the future. A spoon that stirs tea clockwise even in the southern hemisphere. A sandal that never trips over its own laces. Even Hephaestus has to admit he's impressed. You're chaotic, he mutters, but there's something there. Hermes winks, already fitting one of the sandals onto his left foot. Hephaestus eventually shoos you both out, muttering about needing real work time, and anti-Hermes locks on the tool chest. Back outside, the sky is turning honey-colored with late morning light. Hermes skips ahead now, wearing a tool belt with absolutely nothing useful in it, unless you count a singing nail and a pebble that gives relationship advice. You catch up and Hermes says, let's visit the mortals next. You pause. Mortals? He nods. Time to see what they really think of the gods. You sigh, already sensing another adventure. Another lie. Another goat inexplicably painted gold. But honestly, you wouldn't miss it for anything. You follow Hermes down from Olympus, skipping over ridgelines and lazy clouds, the world below blinking awake in patchy morning sunlight. Fields stretch into quilted patterns. Olive groves shimmer with dew, and small villages begin their daily routines. Roosters, bread ovens, and someone already yelling about fish prices. Hermes, of course, doesn't exactly walk into town. No, he shapeshifts into an absolutely unconvincing farmer, too clean, too symmetrical, and inexplicably glowing under the tunic, and strolls in with a shepherd's crook and a grin that suggests he's ready to buy something, sell something, or convince someone that their donkey is actually a sacred relic. You trail behind as he makes his way to the town square where a handful of mortals are gathered, gossiping about crop prices and which minor deity cursed the well this time. Hermes casually inserts himself into the conversation like he's been there all week. So how do you all feel about the gods? There's a pause. Then someone mutters, well, Ares started 3 wars last week. Another adds, and Aphrodite seduced my cousin's husband again. A third sighs and says, honestly, I just pray to Hestia and hope the house doesn't fall apart. Hermes beams. No one prays to Hermes. They shrug. He's clever, sure. But who trusts a god who smiles while pickpocketing you? Hermes fake gasps. Slander. The villagers laugh. You can't help but chuckle, too. Then he drops the disguise, just for a moment. The crowd freezes as his sandals shimmer with winged light, and his eyes glow faint gold. Don't worry, he says. Just checking your customer satisfaction levels. Someone faints. Someone else claps. A child tugs his robe and asks, can you make my goat fly? He thinks, possibly. Then, because Hermes never leaves a place without stirring the pot, he hands the child a tiny scroll. Write your goat a poem. If it's good, it might happen. Historians still argue whether this moment was one of the earliest mythical references to poetry as divine currency or whether Hermes was just trolling a toddler. You suspect both are true. By mid-morning, Hermes is leading a parade of curious mortals into the hills. He offers riddles for bread flips, coins that land on their edges, and tells fortunes that somehow reference events that haven't even been invented yet. Someone asks if they'll ever find true love. He answers yes, unless you buy that purple tunic. Then disaster. The tunic vendor glares. Hermes bows, then vanishes, and you follow again. Because he's already halfway to the coast muttering something about dolphins' lyres and whether Poseidon really needs all that salt, you realize something trudging behind him across sun-drenched fields. Hermes isn't just the god of transitions, he is the transition. The moment the question forms, the fork in the road, the pause before a punchline. He doesn't walk straight lines. He dances through thresholds. And for better or worse, you're stuck in his orbit. Not that you mind. You barely catch your breath before Hermes is dragging you by the elbow, no less down toward the rocky coast. The sea sprawls out ahead like a cracked blue mirror, and the air shifts from warm olive breeze to salt spray chill that sneaks under your tunic. He pauses, sniffs the air, and says with absolute confidence, "Yep, time to bother Poseidon." You try to object, you really do. But Hermes is already kicking off his sandals and wading in. He doesn't swim exactly. He skips across the shallows, barefoot and somehow bone dry. You flail after him, soaking your feet in the process. Of course, he cups his hands to his mouth and shouts, "Uncle Poseidon, it's me, your favorite nephew. I brought questions." The sea grumbles, and you remember something important. The god of the sea is not particularly known for his patience. The waves swirl foam rising into the vague shape of a beard. And there he is, Poseidon rising from the tide like a cranky tsunami in dad sandals. "What Poseidon bellows do you want?" Hermes smiles innocently. "Just checking in. Wanted to see if you needed help with tides. Dolphins. Maybe an enchanted seashell giveaway." Poseidon glares. "I do not need help." He glares harder, then pauses. "You're the one who gave Apollo that cursed kazoo, aren't you?" Hermes blinks. He said he wanted a wind instrument. Historians still argue whether that incident sparked a temporary lyre ban on Mount Olympus, or if Poseidon was just particularly sensitive to off-key whistling. Either way, the kazoo was not a hit. You sidestep a jellyfish. Hermes, meanwhile, starts building a tiny boat out of driftwood and seaweed, humming a jaunty tune about barnacles and revenge. Poseidon watches, arms crossed, sea trident glowing faintly. "What is that supposed to be?" Hermes replies, "A prototype for a portable fish spa, but also a bribe." Poseidon narrows his eyes, then bursts out laughing, which is honestly more terrifying than if he'd summoned a whirlpool. "Leave it on the shore," he says, "and don't come back unless it actually works." Hermes bows dramatically. "Always a pleasure." As Poseidon disappears into a salty mist, muttering something about nephews and nerve, you exhale, relieved. But Hermes, he's already halfway back to dry land, stuffing a seagull feather into his belt like a trophy. Now he says, "Let's visit Artemis. She's been way too quiet lately." You start to protest, but he's not listening. He's whistling to himself. 1 foot in the mortal realm, one winged sandal still dripping sea foam and somehow already dry again. Because that's the thing with Hermes. He moves too fast for the rules to catch up. And you keep following, unsure if you're being led into chaos insight or just a series of divine Yelp reviews. Possibly all three. Artemis, goddess of the hunt. The moon and extremely strict guest policies is not someone you just drop in on. Especially not unannounced. Especially not if you've recently annoyed Poseidon with a seaweed bribe. But Hermes has never let divine etiquette get in the way of a good idea or a mediocre one. So naturally, he leads you straight into the shadowy thickets of her sacred forest, whistling a song made entirely of bird imitations and off-rhythm snaps. He's dressed himself in a deerskin cloak and a crown made of twigs that looks like it was designed by someone who's never seen a deer or a crown. "Won't you be mad you ask brushing branches out of your face? Only if we wake her up weirdly," Hermes says. "So don't trip over anything." You immediately trip over a root. Artemis Forest is eerie in that way only divine forests can be too quiet, too green, too watched. Every leaf seems to breathe and the trees rearrange themselves ever so slightly when you're not looking. It's like walking through someone's diary. Eventually, you spot her. Artemis kneels beside a moonlit stream, sharpening an arrow that gleams like it was forged from starlight and sarcasm. Her hounds watch you with twin pairs of glowing eyes. She doesn't look up. "Hermes," she says flatly, "why are you here?" Hermes, undeterred, does a cartwheel and ends in a bow. "Just came to admire your ambiance, and to see if you'd like this fox whistle I invented." He tosses her a bone-carved object that chirps like a mildly confused squirrel. Artemis raises one eyebrow. "Foxes don't sound like that." Hermes shrugs. "Depends on the region." She sighs, tucks the whistle into her belt anyway, and finally stands. Towering, regal, armed to the teeth, and yet not unkind. You watch as she glances at Hermes, really looks at him before saying, "You always show up when something's about to shift." Hermes tilts his head. "That's kind of my thing." She studies him for a moment, then says, "The Titans are whispering again. Something stirs under the mountains." Hermes' grin fades a fraction. "You don't know what it means?" "Not exactly, but you feel it too. A kind of cosmic draft. The unsettling sense that something ancient is leaning closer." Historians still argue whether myths like this reflect real political anxieties of ancient Greek city-states encoded through divine drama, or if they're just what happens when poets run out of metaphors for earthquakes. Either way, Artemis seems troubled. She gestures toward a low-hanging moon. "Keep your eyes open, messenger." Hermes nods. "No jokes, no riddles. Just for once." Then he turns to you, whispers, "Okay, that was serious. Let's go find Dionysus and unserious it." You hesitate. He's already vanished into the shadows, whistling something new, something wild off-key and full of promise. You chase the sound, because that's what you do now. If Artemis's forest was a shrine to silence, Dionysus's vineyard is a hymn to chaos. You arrive just as the moon begins to tilt slightly sideways, or maybe that's just the wine-scented air hitting your senses like a velvet pillow soaked in fermented figs and questionable decisions. Hermes is already here, naturally balancing on a wine barrel and wearing a wreath of ivy that looks freshly stolen from a statue. Around him, a flock of very merry maenads dance barefoot in the grass, flinging flower petals and occasionally breaking into song. Or arguments, or interpretive wrestling. Dionysus lounges beneath a canopy of grapevines, sipping something suspiciously purple from a golden chalice shaped like a goat's head. His robes are half-buttoned, which is odd because there are no buttons, and his expression flickers between sleepy delight and existential boredom. Hermes Dionysus drawls, "You look like a toga salesman during wine season." Hermes bows. "And you look like last Tuesday's regret. We match." You settle onto a cushion made of grape leaves and resignation, watching as the god of wine waves a hand, summoning a dish of glowing olives that immediately sprout tiny parasols. No one questions it. "Why are we here?" you ask, blinking at a squirrel, currently stealing Dionysus's grapes and dragging them into a flute. Hermes stretches out on a hammock made entirely of vines. "We're here," he says, "because sometimes you need to see what too much looks like to appreciate balance." You're not sure if that's wisdom or hangover foreshadowing. The night thickens. Dionysus, in between sips, asks Hermes what it's like being the messenger. The in-between guy. The god of liminal spaces. Hermes answers with a shrug. "It's like being the comma in a run-on sentence." Beautiful Dionysus slurs, and then spills half his chalice onto a nearby turtle. The turtle does not mind. The two gods swap stories, some ancient, some made up on the spot. Hermes tells one about a talking statue that convinced a fisherman to become a playwright. Dionysus counters with a tale about a singing fig tree that became queen of a small island until she eloped with a dolphin. Historians still argue whether myths like these were morality tales, drug-induced metaphors, or simply ancient stand-up comedy. Probably all three. As the revelry swirls around you, it starts to feel like time itself is drunk. The stars wobble. The vines seem to breathe. Someone releases a goat wearing earrings into the crowd, and it's not the weirdest part of the evening. You sit beside Hermes under the tangled branches, and for a moment, things go quiet again. Ever think of just Stopping, you ask. He doesn't answer right away. Then stopping isn't my job. He looks up at the moon, now low and orange and utterly indifferent. Movement is the point. You lie back on the grass, the earth soft beneath you, wine-stained dreams creeping in like fog. And around you gods dance. And the world spins on. You wake to dew on your face and the unmistakable sound of Hermes arguing with a goose. Not just any goose, a large, impressively irritable specimen perched atop a mossy altar, honking like it's delivering a sacred oracle and refusing to move until someone produces a barley cake. Hermes, crouched and gesturing with theatrical seriousness, pleads, "You're blocking the path of destiny, my feathered friend. Some of us have godly errands to run." The goose honks again. You swear it sounds like pay up. Eventually, Hermes flicks the goose a fig, muttering, "Inflation hits everyone." With the way now clear, he turns to you. "Time to visit the underworld." You blink. "Excuse me?" "Don't worry," he says with a grin. "We're not staying. Just dropping in." Which is, of course, exactly the kind of thing Hermes says right before something goes deeply sideways. He leads you to a quiet grove where the trees lean just a little too close and the air forgets to rustle. A low cave yawns open ahead, its mouth wet with shadows. You step inside immediately, feeling the chill of things that don't blink. Hermes snaps his fingers. A dim silver glow surrounds your path like moonlight trapped in syrup. He chats as you walk, casual as ever. Most mortals think Hades is all doom and gloom. Honestly, he's just organized. Like the world's most introverted librarian. You nod slowly, resisting the urge to check behind you every few seconds. Soon you reach the river Styx, a quiet expanse of dark water still as spilled ink. The ferryman Charon is already waiting, tapping his skeletal foot like he has brunch plans. Hermes tosses him a coin from behind your ear. "Nice trick," Charon grumbles, taking it anyway. You float across the silence, pressing into your ears like soft wax. Beyond the banks, shadowy shapes linger, souls murmuring secrets to no one in particular. Ancient warriors reenacting arguments about helmet sizes and a poet debating a tree about metaphors. Historians still argue whether these visions reflect genuine spiritual beliefs or were cautionary allegories designed to reinforce proper burial rites. Hermes naturally treats it like a museum tour. He points out exhibits. "That guy insulted Demeter's barley. Still here. That one tried to flirt with a nymph disguised as a bear. Didn't go well." Finally, you reach Hades' Hall. It's not gloomy exactly, just extremely well appointed in black marble and tasteful despair. There are ferns. Cerberus naps beside the throne, three heads twitching in canine dreams, one snarling, one snoring, and one softly humming. Hades looks up from a scroll. "Hermes, uncle," a beat passes. "What do you want?" Hades asks. "Just checking the cross-realm postal system. Making sure your epic regrets haven't clogged the chute." Hades sighs and rubs his temples. "This is why I let Persephone handle correspondence." There's a pause. "Where is she?" you ask before you can stop yourself. Hades glances toward the garden where a single pomegranate tree blooms defiantly under enchanted sun lamps. "Out," he says in a voice that contains a year of longing. Hermes nods knowingly. 6 months is never enough. You leave before Cerberus can fully wake and start categorizing your scent. Outside, the air feels warmer, lighter, and Hermes, adjusting his sandals, says, "Time to visit one last place before lunch." You shudder to think what that means, but you follow anyway, because somehow in his chaos, Hermes always knows where the thread goes next. You barely have time to brush the underworld dust off your tunic before Hermes grabs your wrist, and with the elegance of a seasoned stage magician swirls the air into something resembling a staircase made entirely of clouds, old scrolls, and discarded festival tickets. "We're going up," he says. "How up?" you ask. "All the way." The stairs wobble underfoot, occasionally muttering to themselves in ancient dialects. Hermes, completely unfazed, leaps upward like a caffeinated goat. You follow, reluctantly climbing through layers of atmosphere until the air becomes thin, cool, and laced with harp music that seems to play just slightly off-key, like Even perfection gets bored sometimes. Then Olympus, or more accurately, a side patio of Olympus where Hera holds court today. You recognize it immediately, high columns, polished stone, and the scent of judgment in the air. Peacocks strut around like entitled interns, and every cushion is embroidered with passive-aggressive symbols of divine authority. Hera sits on a throne that manages to look both welcoming and mildly terrifying. Her robes shimmer like moonlight caught in porcelain, and her expression is that of someone who's had just enough nonsense for 1 millennia. She raises an eyebrow. Hermes. He bows extravagantly. Dearest stepmother, how radiant your temple smell. You've been in the underworld? She says, wrinkling her nose. He coughs, briefly. You feel her gaze shift to you, not cruel, not kind, just curious. So Hera says, leaning forward, why bring a mortal? Hermes flashes a grin. For contrast, Hera's lips twitch, almost a smile. Almost. You don't move. A peacock hops onto your shoulder and stares directly into your soul. Hermes, never one for silence, launches into a chaotic but surprisingly heartfelt monologue about boundaries, symbolism, and the time he turned a whole choir into mice because they couldn't hit a B flat. Hera listens, barely blinking. Then she says softly, "You're trying to stitch something." Hermes nods. "Something big." Another nod. She exhales. "You'll need more than tricks." To your utter shock, she rises and crosses to a tall bronze cabinet, unlocking it with a pin from her hair. Inside is a small glass jar glowing faintly gold. She holds it out. For weaving order into chaos, she says. Hermes accepts it with a rare seriousness, bowing low. "Thank you." Historians still argue whether Hera ever assisted Hermes with any task beyond mild scolding, or whether this moment was a later myth inserted to give her more narrative dimension. Either way, something shifts in the air, something rare. Before leaving, Hermes looks back at her. "Your cow is still guarding that nymph, by the way." She smirks. "Best decision I ever made." And with that, you're walking back down the cloud stairs, the jar tucked under Hermes' arm, glowing like a quiet secret. You ask him what it does. "Probably explodes," he says. He's joking. Probably. Back on solid ground. Well, as solid as myth allows, Hermes seems energized. He spins the glowing jar in his palm like it's a toy, then promptly slips it into his satchel next to a half-eaten fig bar and what looks suspiciously like a compass made from turtle shell. "All right," he says, brushing non-existent dust off his tunic. "We've met Hera, avoided being turned into decorative furniture, and acquired one suspiciously divine MacGuffin. Now it's time to visit someone squishier." You pause mid-step. "Squishier." "Demeter." You blink. "Goddess of agriculture, seasons, mother of Persephone." Hermes nods. "And queen of emotional weather patterns." "Bring snacks." Soon you're walking a path that smells of wild thyme and soft dirt. Your sandals catching bits of wheat husk as the world slowly golden hues around you. Demeter's realm is less a palace and more an endless late summer field, warm humming and way too fertile to be casual. You find her kneeling in the rows, hands covered in soil hair crowned with poppies. She looks up, squints and mutters, "If that's another drought spirit, I swear." Hermes waves. "It's just us with questions. And a goose possibly." Demeter wipes her hands on her robe and eyes him. "What did you steal this time?" "Borrowed," Hermes corrects. "Temporarily." She sighs, clearly choosing not to pursue it. Instead, she gestures for you both to sit beside her beneath a fig tree that appears to be fruiting out of season, as if it too is trying to impress the goddess of growth. She pulls a loaf of barley bread from a woven pouch, breaks it in 3, and hands you a piece. "So," she says, not unkindly, "what nonsense are you dragging across my fields today?" Hermes explains in his own way about the weaving the jar, the myths collapsing into each other. Demeter listens, one hand absently petting a very smug-looking rooster. Then she leans in. "And what do you expect me to do? Remind us how things start." Hermes says, "You're the beginning of cycles, the root of all seasons." Her face softens. "You remembered." He grins. "I forget a lot of things." That's not one of them. Demeter pulls a kernel of wheat from her palm and hands it to him. This, she says, is order. Not the loud kind, not the glamorous. The kind that quietly feeds everyone when nobody else is looking. Hermes takes it reverently and tucks it beside Hera's jar. You watch the two gods, Chaos and Harvest, sit in silence, sharing a moment of mythic stillness. Then Demeter adds, "You should probably stop by Hephaestus next. He knows how to build." Hermes sighs. "Do I have to? Unless you want the whole thing to collapse mid-metaphor," she says, smiling faintly. Historians still argue whether Demeter's quiet authority ever extended beyond her mythological domains, or if this is a retroactive recognition of how foundational agriculture actually is, to literally everything. Either way, she stands and dusts off her hands. You rise, stomach full, head spinning with kernels of something that might actually be understanding. As you walk away, Hermes glances at you. "Don't worry," he says. "We're almost at the fun part." You don't ask what his definition of fun is. You already suspect it involves explosions, poetry, and at least one sentient goat. If Demeter's realm was golden and gentle, Hephaestus's forge is the polar opposite, hot, loud, and entirely indifferent to your comfort. The moment you step into the cavernous workshop, the air thickens with smoke and metal tang. Sparks bloom in every direction like rebellious fireflies with attitude. Massive gears, groan bellows, wheeze, and somewhere behind a curtain of steam something very large and possibly alive snorts. "Welcome to productivity," Hermes murmurs, eyes twinkling. You follow him through winding corridors of bronze and iron, past automaton arms hammering endlessly, and half-finished statues muttering their own names. A small mechanical crab scuttles across your foot and chirps apologetically. Finally, you find Hephaestus himself. Muscular, soot-streaked, and surprisingly focused, considering he's juggling a molten blade, a vat of bubbling lava resin, and what looks like a pet salamander made entirely of gears. "Oi," he grunts without looking. "Don't touch anything unless you want your eyebrows to learn Latin." Charming as ever, Hermes says cheerfully, hopping onto an anvil like it's a park bench. Hephaestus finally glances up. "Why are you here? Did one of your pranks backfire and turn into a cosmic emergency again?" "Possibly," Hermes says, pulling out the jar from Hera and the wheat kernel from Demeter. "I need to make something that lasts." That gets Hephaestus's attention. He wipes his hands on a rag that was probably once a toga and takes the items delicately, well delicately, for someone whose handshake could bend steel. "What kind of thing?" he asks. Hermes shrugs. "A tapestry, a map, a net. I haven't decided yet." Hephaestus snorts. "You never do." Still, he studies the objects like they're puzzles. Then, muttering to himself, he begins setting up strange instruments, a loom powered by steam thread made from moonlight, a needle forged from the tip of a fallen star. As he works, Hermes talks about movement, about myth, about stories that tangle and loop back on themselves like badly knotted sandals. You listen quietly, the heat pressing into your skin like a weighted blanket made of coals. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus's mythical forge was purely allegorical, a metaphor for the human instinct to build, or if it stemmed from real ancient knowledge of metalwork, so advanced it felt divine. Watching him now, you begin to wonder. The gods aren't just metaphors, they're machinery, rituals with names, ideas with sandals. Hephaestus finishes assembling the frame and sets it humming softly. "It'll take time to weave," he says. "More time than this myth allows." Hermes nods. "I can wait." "You won't though," Hephaestus mutters, but there's no malice. He hands Hermes a key made of woven bronze. "If it starts to unravel, this might help." "Might, you ask?" Hephaestus just raises an eyebrow. "Everything might, even you." Hermes pockets the key. That's the spirit. You leave the forge with your hair slightly singed, and your sense of stability both shaken and oddly reinforced. Hermes seems unusually quiet, running his fingers along the edges of the bronze key. "Almost time," he says, "for what you ask." He looks up. "To ask the spider." "You really hope that's a metaphor?" "It isn't." The wind changes. It's the kind of shift you feel behind your eyes, air thinning into stillness like the sky is holding its breath. You and Hermes stand before an old crooked olive tree on the edge of everything. A place older than stories where the rocks remember your footsteps before you even take them. The spider is waiting. Arachne. Her name once echoed through gossip halls and taverns, a cautionary tale embroidered into generations. The mortal girl who dared to outweave Athena. The girl who didn't just challenge a goddess, she won, and lost everything for it. You peer up. There she is, half shimmering. Memory half-webbed recluse suspended in a lattice of threads, so fine they catch moonlight like spilled secrets. Her many eyes blink slowly, not unkindly, not angry, just tired. Hermes steps forward. I need help, he says, and for once he means it. Arachne doesn't speak, not in words. She tilts her head. The web vibrates. Hermes pulls out the bronze key, the wheat kernel, the glowing jar. You're not sure how she moves so quickly, but the items vanish into her silk. She begins to weave. No loom, no tools, just limbs and memory. And a grace so ancient it hurts to look at. Threads shimmer into place, bending time and myth. You see battles unfought, songs never sung. Cities built by children who dance their dreams into stone. Her tapestry expands. Hermes watches like a kid seeing his first constellation. You spot familiar shapes. Hera's cow, Demeter's fields, Hades at his pomegranate tree. Even you, yes, you appear rendered in thread, standing just off-center. The background shifts behind you. Are you moving forward, or is the story folding inward? Historians still argue whether Arachne's punishment was divine justice or a petty grudge disguised as cosmic order. But watching her now draped in shadow, crowned in thread, you realize she is the order. The thing the gods feared, because it couldn't be charmed or bargained with. Truth told in silk, Arachne finishes. The web stills. She steps back, limbs folding. The tapestry shimmers, then folds itself into a single long thread, which Hermes takes carefully, reverently. He turns to you. It's time. For what? For you to carry it, he says, and places the thread in your palm. You're the one who walked the path, listened, remembered. You stare at it, a simple strand, gold and fragile. But as it rests against your skin, it pulses faintly like a heartbeat. Like a whisper reminding you that all stories start with one brave, ridiculous question. Now what? You glance back at Arachne, who gives the faintest nod. The wind breathes again. Clouds drift. Hermes smiles. Well, he says, now we rest. And for the first time tonight, the gods fall silent. The myths untangled. The weaving complete. You lie back in the grass thread tucked safely beneath your palm. The sky blinks its stars at you soft and slow. Your limbs grow heavy. Even Hermes lies still beside you, sandals kicked off, eyes closed, mouth just barely curled into a dream smile. The olive tree sways gently overhead. And in that hush, the kind only ancient stories know, you finally drift. Now, let your breath follow the rhythm of the soft wind curling through olive branches. Slow, easy, just like the thread in your hand, weightless and warm. Let your shoulders drop a little more. Let your eyes soften, half-lidded, like you're watching clouds form stories you don't need to remember. You've wandered through myth tonight, not as a bystander, but as a gentle echo stitched into its fabric. You've heard whispers from Demeter's garden sparks, from Hephaestus's forge, a peacock's sigh beneath Hera's throne. You even walked beneath the quiet pomegranate tree, where longing tastes like red seeds. But now, the tapestry is still. There are no gods here anymore, no thrones, no thunder. Just the breath of the world rising and falling, like the soft tide of sleep pulling gently at your thoughts. Let them go one by one. You don't need to hold any of it. Not the questions, not the footsteps, not even the golden thread. Just drift. Let the myths unspool into dusk, quiet and slow, until even the stories forget themselves. And all that's left is the hush, the comfort of a soft blanket, the weight of calm, the warmth of a fire that never needed a name. Sleep now. The gods can wait.